Hello Columbus, this is Tom Silva from the ancient house and Isle House. On Saturday, February 16th, I will be at the Dispatch Home and Garden Expo. When the film team arrived a week or two later, he says, "I want to come by the project that we were working on." Suddenly this person shows up. Tom Silva, the renowned carpenter and builder from this old house, finally addressed the circulating stories that had followed him for years. He begins sliding a wire up my shirt and asks, "What's this guy want?" He adds, Don't pay attention to him." Fans have been murmuring about this reality for decades, and he has been silently sitting on it. How does someone who has spent more than 40 years in the spotlight, established a solid reputation for workmanship, and managed to conceal one of the most significant behind-the-scenes scandals? Hold on tight, for we're about to travel from the warm charm of New England woodworking to the unvarnished reality that even ardent enthusiasts were unaware of. Come on. The early years and career path of Tom Silva in carpentry. Tom Silva didn't begin his career in construction in front of applauding spectators or under studio lights. Long before anyone would ever refer to him as America's most reliable home renovation expert, it all began in the sleepy nooks of Lexington, Massachusetts. He was just another child in a working-class area before becoming the man so many would later look to for help repairing ancient houses and repairing leaky roofs. Sawdust, hammer echoes, and the distinct smell of newly cut wood filled my childhood. Isn't it ironic that the most amazing tales frequently start in the most unlikely places? Building was more than simply a job in the family Tom was born into. It was a lifestyle. Tom's father was an experienced builder, so he didn't need to send him to an expensive school to learn the trade. Rather, he brought him to construction sites and gave him a tool belt. People who knew Tom back then said he never shied away from hard work. In addition to learning the how of construction, he also learnt the why of each cut and measurement through observation and listening. Why is that beam being reinforced? Why is this joint important? Why put effort into making something that no one will ever see? The pattern for the craftsman Tom would become was created by the responses that were passed down from father to son. His entire career eventually revolved around those early lessons which emphasized doing things correctly the first time. With that soothing voice and skilled hand, you have witnessed him construct, repair, and instruct. Fans, however, have long questioned what lies beyond Tom Silva's composed exterior. What's the reason behind his recent retreat? Tom finally speaks out at the age of 77, confirming the long-running rumors about him. And what he says next may leave you stunned, regardless of whether you've been watching him for decades or have only recently discovered the show. Keep clicking. The final reveal is one you won't want to miss. Tom grew up in Lexington, a city known for its colonial architecture and historic charm, where he was surrounded by timeless architectural masterpieces. He saw more than just houses. Every brick and every beam told a story to him. These weren't merely buildings. They were carefully constructed, long-lasting artifacts of history. It begs the question of how much of our upbringing subtly influences who we end up being. Tom's true education came from working with seasoned tradespeople who were intimately familiar with their craft, whereas many others in the construction industry may have begun with textbooks or lectures from trade schools. It has nothing to do with passing tests. It has to do with leaving a legacy. Tom's father left him more than simply tools. He inherited a way of thinking that valued pride above money and excellence over shortcuts. In the end, Tom and his brother Richard made the decision to apply all they had learned to their own endeavors. Silva Brothers Construction was established in this manner. A family-owned company with traditional values that is willing to try new things. Tom addressed every project with the same attention to detail he had learned as a youngster, whether it was a minor remodel or a major historical restoration. And the outcomes were self-evident. News rapidly got out in Massachusetts. You called the Silvas if you wanted it done correctly. The producers at this antique mansion were eventually drawn to this reputation for superior craftsmanship. The program was already well liked at the time by viewers who wanted to learn more about home restoration and repairs. However, they required someone who lived the work, not simply knew it. Tom was a wonderful match. What started off as a guest stint developed into a permanent position, one that filled American homes with Tom's kindness, insight, and sincere passion for the trade. Nevertheless, Tom never lost sight of his roots in spite of his celebrity and the TV cameras. He never lost sight of the basic pleasures of his employment, such as the pride in imparting information to others, the satisfaction of a job well done, or the delight of solving a challenging problem. Fans adored him because he was genuine, not only because he was a talented actor. In addition to demonstrating load-bearing walls on television, he was the same man who would assist his neighbor in patching a roof. Tom's legacy now encompasses more than only his architectural creations. People are the focus. It's about showing people that no matter where you start in a dusty garage or a sleepy New England town, you can create something enduring, that workmanship still counts, and that putting pleasure in your work still has meaning. We all need more stories like that these days, don't we? Ultimately, Tom Silva had no intention of becoming a national celebrity or a television personality. His only goals were to construct things correctly, to honor the teachings of his father, and to impart some of that knowledge to anyone who will listen. Perhaps that's why his narrative is so captivating. Building a life, one plank, one beam, and one sincere day's labor at a time, is more important than pursuing celebrity. How Tom Silva came to represent this historic home. Television was the last thing on Tom Silva's mind in the mid-1980s when he was just going about his daily business as a diligent contractor. Why would it be? He had a successful construction company, a constant flow of work, and no desire to appear in front of a camera. However, life has shown us that occasionally a single chance encounter can completely change the course of events. Russell Morash, a television producer, and his neighbor, was the fortuitous encounter that led to that meeting. Now, how often does a neighbor find out about someone? Doesn't it sound nearly like a scene from a movie? But it felt quite genuine to Tom. At first, Tom didn't exactly leap at the chance when Morash suggested that Tom might make an appearance on television. He flatly rejected it, claiming that he was just too busy, and who was to blame? He couldn't imagine balancing cameras, scripts, or TV audiences on top of his full-time job as the head of Silva Brothers Construction. Morash, however, noticed something more. He was searching for more than one contractor. He wanted someone who was genuine, talented, and had a strong sense of purpose in their work. And he found that in Tom. Tom turned down the offer, but Moores persisted. He thought Tom's expertise deserved a larger platform, because he had already seen it up close when Silva Brothers Construction constructed the set for his PBS program, The Victory Garden. It wasn't a formal pitch meeting or audition that marked the true turning moment. It was Morash, who showed up at one of Tom's job locations without warning, accompanied by a camera team. Tom claims that he was preparing a space for Norm Abram, another frequenter, to film a program about a kitchen. Before he knew it, Morash had entered, attached a microphone on him, and suddenly Tom Silva was on camera. No rehearsal, no script, just him, his equipment, and his expertise. Sometimes life doesn't wait for you to be ready, isn't that funny? Tom became the show's general contractor by 1986, and Silva Brothers Construction was officially designated as the program's contracting firm 2 years later. Tom's influence on the show only increased after that. He took on remodeling tasks over the years that most people would never even consider doing. Consider the Nantucket House from 1887. Although it began as a standard renovation, it ultimately amounted to a near-total reconstruction. The 1906 Arts and Crafts Church came next. Indeed, the crew transformed a real church into a residence. How frequently do you hear about such a thing? A 1721 farmhouse that had really tipped backward by 8 inches because of a rotted sill was one of the more astounding tasks he worked on. Consider attempting to fix such a thing without completely demolishing it. Not to mention the Manchester by the Sea project, which Tom himself said was far too large for the period available. They completed it in 10 months instead of the 18 that were anticipated. What else says more about his work ethic and capacity for change under duress than that? However, Tom Silva's involvement with this old house extended well beyond blueprints, beams, and bricks. He eventually rose to prominence as one of the show's most adored teachers. He had a talent for simplifying difficult construction projects into manageable chunks. In addition to watching the changes, Millions of people tuned in to learn from Tom because he made studying seem simple and even enjoyable. He once stated that he most likely would have been a teacher if he hadn't chosen to become a contractor. And in a lot of ways the show helped him become just that. His enthusiasm for teaching extended beyond television. He developed a strong interest in vocational education and was instrumental in This Old House's Generation Next campaign, which encouraged young people to think about pursuing jobs in skilled trades. Tom reminded everyone that there are more than 5 million open positions only because there aren't enough qualified candidates to fill them, during a time when the nation is experiencing a labor deficit in these vital industries. It's more than a statistic, it's an exhortation to act. And a man who has dedicated his life to building, teaching, and giving back is the ideal person to deliver it. Of course, Nathan, a longer, more relatable, and emotionally compelling version of that transformation can be found here. One that instructs viewers to remain focused until the very end while softly guiding them into the following segment. What then will stand out the most in people's memories when they stop to consider Tom Silva's amazing legacy? They will undoubtedly recall the astounding renovations, the way he transformed chaos into crisp lines, the technical mastery, and his composed, unflappable demeanor that somehow made even the most difficult construction seem manageable. But if you look a little closer, you'll discover something even more remarkable. The quiet dignity of a guy who became the lifeblood of a whole generation of builders, visionaries, and do-it-yourselfers despite never seeking glory or needing praise. The idea of that one unexpected yes is crazy, isn't it? Millions of others were inspired to pick up a tool, fix what was broken, or build what they had only ever dreamed of by one door he never thought he would walk through. Naturally, though, any legacy has its share of whispers, questions, and fissures. Things then take a completely unexpected turn. Because there were secrets, silent conflicts, and realities that Tom Silva has kept to himself up until this point behind the camera, behind the kind grin, and behind those rough hands. After all these years, what did he ultimately choose to disclose? Why now? And is what others have been whispering all along true? Stay tuned, because what you're going to hear next could permanently alter your perception of Tom. Don't blink. The gossip, disputes, and what he ultimately verified behind the friendly grins and seamless project tours that visitors have grown to adore about this historic home. The plot was developing in a much more subdued manner, one that has generally stayed behind the curtains up to this point. Tom Silva, the show's longtime general contractor and adored representative of pragmatic craftsmanship, is now approaching his late 70s and has now shared the behind-the-scenes challenges that have repeatedly threatened to cost him his post. As it happens, retaining finding the proper nail or taking extra measurements wasn't enough to keep the integrity of a home renovation show intact. It also entailed resisting changes that didn't always make sense to someone who had dedicated his life to doing things correctly, as well as creative pressures and production shortcuts. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, Silva was in constant conflict with the show's creators. On the surface, it might have been dismissed as typical creative disputes, but these weren't little arguments about which viewpoint looked better on camera or how a scene was filmed, he said. These were long-standing disputes over the program's core principles. Silva felt that the craft should always come first in this old mansion. Genuine challenges, genuine solutions, real materials, and real tools. That was what it was all about. However, he thought it was like denying the importance of the difficult aspects of the labor when producers began to shorten building schedules in order to meet filming needs. Cutting corners, even for the camera, felt like a betrayal to someone who had lived his entire life following the book. If the foundation is weak, can a house still be sturdy? Tom saw it that way. Since honesty is the foundation of every build, including the program itself, tensions escalated until Silva finally lost it. He offered a choice to the producers. He would either leave or give him more authority over the portrayal of the construction. It wasn't a bluff. A man was defending his trade. What was the point after all if the audience couldn't believe what they were seeing? Fortunately, the producers understood how vital Tom was, not just for his abilities, but also for the confidence he had gained from fans all throughout the nation.
He was given more control over the process, and the show was able to preserve one of its most authentic features. However, it didn't end there. In the year 2004, Tom found himself at a crossroads once more. The tension had increased once more, and he went farther this time. He started drafting a letter of resignation. It wasn't a snap decision. After discussing it with his family, and considering his choices, he gave the idea of permanently leaving the show some serious thought. He was exhausted by the continual pressure to make choices that prioritized production flow over construction rationale. Imagine spending decades honing a craft, only to feel as though you were being asked to make up some of it for practical reasons. To preserve your reputation, your labor, and your legacy, would you stay, or would you leave? When the producers realized how serious Tom was, they acted quickly. They didn't merely plead with him to stay, they provided autonomy, which was even more valuable. They promised not to alter his work in order to increase runtime. They pledged to uphold the technical standards he valued, and granted him greater authority on construction sites. Even though the resignation letter was never issued, the fact that it was there told viewers how close they were to losing the very person who made this old house authentic. The 2010 success followed. Even television was evolving. Audiences were changing, and streaming services were flourishing. Trendier content, happier edits, and younger looks. The new normal was this. In order to make place for younger specialists, who in their opinion, may connect more with younger audiences, the producers began to discuss cutting Silva's screen time. Tom, however, saw this as more than age or camera presence. He recognized that the show's core, dependability, profundity, and dedication to educating viewers the actual process were in danger of being compromised. This old house was meant to reveal the gritty side of the glamour, wasn't that right? The actual labor-intensive process that goes into the polished floors. He didn't remain silent, he gave a hard shove back. The audience didn't pay attention to flash, he reminded everyone. They listened to him for his wisdom, and the years of practical experience he brought to the table. He wasn't by himself either. Long-time watchers, fans, and even some of the younger employees supported him. It was an obvious message. This old house wasn't all that Tom Silva was. He served as its cornerstone. It's simple to appreciate Tom Silva's artistry in retrospect. However, many people might not be aware of the strength he needed to maintain the integrity of the show. He did more than just construct homes. He earned people's trust, and that trust was built not only on wood and nails, but also on the silent struggles he waged in the background to preserve the core of something that millions of people valued. Perhaps consider how many times he had to struggle to maintain the integrity of the camera the next time you saw him on TV. And if he hadn't, how would the show look now? Think about how many silent wars he had to win to keep that screen honest. The next time you see him smile at the camera, or measure twice before a cut. Few could adequately describe his story, but we'll try. Stay with us through to the very end, because what follows is not only tragic, but also unforgettable. Austin Wilson's passing, and its emotional toll. A black cloud unexpectedly descended on this old house's close-knit production staff in 2018. During a filming season, Austin Wilson, a young bright-eyed crew member who had received one-on-one mentoring from the adored Tom Silva, unexpectedly died. It was a devastating form of loss, and without prior notice. It's one of those times when everything else seems insignificant. This was more than simply a professional setback for Tom. It was intimate. His loved ones and the production subtly conveyed how profoundly the tragedy affected him. He wasn't the steady person he usually was. He became quieter during planned meetings, retreated from team discussions, and even started to doubt the course he had taken for decades. Is the time to let go really here? Even for someone like Tom, who had dedicated his life to creating and repairing things, the weight of it all had finally become too much. But this time he was unable to repair what was damaged. Crew members who had known Silva for years said that it was possibly the first time they had ever witnessed him truly contemplating leaving. It was because something basic had changed, not because he no longer loved the profession.